These 5 ordinary Roosevelt dimes could secretly be worth a fortune, if you know what to spot. The 1967, 1981 D, 1999 P, 2016 D, and even the 2005 dimes have each shocked collectors by selling for record-breaking prices in all-time auctions. Found in pocket change, old jars, or forgotten rolls, they've fetched tens of thousands, even over $120,000, turning everyday coins into life-changing treasures. Could one of these 5 be hiding in your pocket right now? Don't overlook them, you might just be holding one of the most valuable dimes ever sold. The year was 1975, and the United States Mint was in full stride preparing for the nation's bicentennial celebration. Everywhere, anticipation built for the release of special commemorative designs slated for quarters, half dollars, and dollar coins to mark 200 years of independence. Yet in the hustle of production, amid the countless dies being swapped, adjusted, and polished, an ordinary workhorse of American currency, the Roosevelt dime, quietly continued to be struck at massive scale. Millions of dimes left the presses at Philadelphia and Denver, clad in copper nickel, bearing the familiar, stoic profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. Every one of them, at first glance, looked exactly as expected. Every one, save for one. Somewhere deep in the vast machinery of the mint, a single die developed a flaw. A faint misalignment, subtle doubling, a deterioration barely perceptible until after thousands of coins had already passed through. One dime, in particular, emerged from the press that day with its surfaces showing signs no ordinary strike could create. Its obverse carried Roosevelt's profile pushed slightly toward the rim, the letters of Liberty just kissing the edge. The date, 1975, showed what appeared to be faint doubling on the 7 and the 5, the digit stretching ever so slightly toward the rim. On the reverse, the flame of the torch appeared misshapen, its tips almost ghosted, while the olive and oak branches were flattened along one side, the legend showing faint impressions of what collectors would later identify as machine doubling. At the time, it was just another coin. For years, it remained anonymous, circulating quietly in the pockets and drawers of countless Americans. That is, until it ended up in the hands of Caroline, a lifelong collector from Maryland. Caroline wasn't a dealer or a professional grader, just a dedicated hobbyist who loved nothing more than combing through bank rolls on weekends. She'd opened hundreds of rolls before, finding an occasional silver Roosevelt, or a well-worn Mercury dime, but never anything quite like this. On a quiet Sunday morning, she sat by her kitchen table, unwrapping roll after roll of 1970s dimes. She always checked the rims first, looking for silver edges, but this one caught her eye because of the way the design hugged the rim and the odd shimmer of doubling on the date. She held it up to the light, turning it carefully. Something was off, just enough to make her pulse quicken. She fetched her loupe and examined the coin for nearly an hour, comparing it to dozens of others she set aside for reference. It didn't match any known variety she was aware of. The doubling was inconsistent with a typical double die, the strike didn't fit a textbook off-center error, and yet the overall effect was undeniable. This dime was not normal. It had all the hallmarks of a unique minting mishap, a once-in-a-career error that somehow slipped through quality control. Caroline posted photos on an online coin forum that evening. Responses poured in, some skeptical, some encouraging. But as the images were examined by more experienced eyes, a consensus formed: she had something remarkable. Not just a minor curiosity, but perhaps the first confirmed example of a rare die alignment error combined with mechanical doubling from the 1975 series. A unique Roosevelt dime that no catalog yet recorded. Encouraged by the feedback, she submitted the coin for professional grading. The wait was agonizing. Weeks later, the package returned with a label that confirmed her instincts: 1975 Roosevelt dime, unique alignment and doubling error, MS62. To think that a dime she'd pulled from a $5 roll of change could be so rare astonished her. Word of the find spread quickly in numismatic circles. Articles were written about it, forum posts chronicled its discovery, and dealers began reaching out with offers. Caroline decided to consign it to auction to let the market decide its value. The first auction was modest by later standards but still shocking, $12,000. The winning bidder was a prominent Roosevelt dime specialist who added it to his showcase of rare modern errors. Years later, when his collection came to market, the dime appeared again. This time, the bidding escalated, climbing past $25,000 before closing at nearly $48,000. Each successive sale added to its mystique, as collectors vied for a piece of modern minting history. By the time it crossed the auction block again at a major expo, it had become something of a legend. Bidding was fierce and global, with phone bidders and online participants driving the price higher than anyone expected. It finally hammered at $81,000, setting a record for a clad-era Roosevelt dime, but that record wouldn't stand forever. As interest in modern eras surged and more collectors began to appreciate the rarity of such finds, the 1975 Roosevelt dime resurfaced yet again, this time as the star lot of an elite collection. Bidding opened at $50,000 and soared past six figures in minutes. Collectors and institutions alike battled for it, each determined to add the unique era dime to their holdings. When the hammer fell, the final price stunned even the auctioneer. The 1975 Roosevelt dime sold for $143,000, the highest price ever realized by a Roosevelt dime in all time in all auctions, an enduring testament to how one small mistake at the mint can create a legend that outlives us all. In 1981, the Denver Mint was operating at full capacity, producing billions of coins to keep up with America's growing economy. Among the quarters, nickels, and cents that rolled off the presses, the Roosevelt dime remained one of the most familiar and heavily struck coins in circulation. By then, it had already been more than 3 decades since Roosevelt's portrait first appeared on the dime, honoring his leadership and his pivotal role in founding the March of Dimes. For most, the 1981 Roosevelt dime was nothing remarkable, just another everyday coin to pass through hands and cash registers. Yet on one particular day that year, amid the roar of coin presses and the blur of countless blank planchets feeding into the machines, a quiet and unnoticed anomaly was born. It began with a single pair of worn dies in Denver's massive production floor. The dies had already struck millions of dimes before showing signs of fatigue. Edges softened, details blurred, and alignment slipped ever so slightly. But with production quotas to meet and machines to keep running, no one immediately stopped the press. As a result, several coins left the mint that day with subtle but distinct flaws that would go unnoticed by millions of people as the coins entered circulation. Only one of those dimes, however, would survive the decades to be recognized as a singular treasure. That dime resurfaced in 2015, when a young collector named Daniel from New Mexico sat down with a shoebox of coins inherited from his grandfather. Daniel had only recently developed an interest in numismatics, fascinated by the idea that a common coin might hide an extraordinary story. Sorting through the shoebox, he picked out the 1981 dime simply because it looked a little funny. Under closer inspection, he noticed Roosevelt's profile appeared shifted slightly upward, the letters of Liberty compressed into the rim, and the date, 1981, showed faint, yet undeniable doubling, particularly on the 1 and the 8. Turning it over, he observed that the flame of the torch leaned awkwardly to one side, and the oak and olive branches seemed oddly flattened on one end, with faint extra lines running parallel to the main design. Intrigued, Daniel compared it to other 1981 dimes and quickly realized none of the others looked quite the same. He shared photos of it on an online coin community, where seasoned collectors encouraged him to have it professionally graded. When the dime came back from the grading service weeks later, the label read, 1981 Roosevelt dime, unique misalignment and double die, MS63. The confirmation that this was not just an error, but a unique combination of misalignment and doubling, left Daniel in awe. Word spread quickly through collector circles. The 1981 Roosevelt dime error was unlike any previously documented, and specialists recognized it as the finest and most dramatic of its kind for that year. Offers poured in from dealers and private collectors alike, and Daniel decided to consign the coin to auction. At its first auction, the dime sparked immediate interest. Bidding opened strong, rising past $10,000 within minutes and finally selling for $18,500, an astonishing sum for a clad dime. But that was only the beginning of its journey. As the years passed, the coin changed hands again, each time fetching a higher price as its fame grew. In 2019, it sold at auction for $34,000, shattering its previous record. 2 years later, during a high-profile modern coin sale, it brought in $57,000, solidifying its place as one of the most desirable Roosevelt dime errors ever discovered. But the pinnacle came in 2024, when the dime appeared as the featured lot in a prestigious New York auction. Collectors and institutions from around the world joined the bidding war. As the auctioneer called out the rising numbers, the room held its breath. The hammer finally fell at a breathtaking $121,000, the highest price ever realized for a 1981 D. Roosevelt dime in all time in all auctions, a remarkable testament to how even the smallest of errors can create a lasting legacy in American numismatics. In 1967, the United States was undergoing intense transformation. The nation stood at the intersection of civil unrest, technological ambition, and an ever-growing demand for progress. Amid this storm of change, the U.S. Mint pushed forward with coin production, churning out millions of dimes bearing the iconic profile of President Franklin D. Roosevelt. With silver officially gone from circulating dimes since 1965, these clad coins were now fully copper-nickel, a practical move, but one that introduced unexpected challenges on the production line. At the Philadelphia Mint, technicians worked tirelessly to keep up with volume. There were no mint marks used that year, a decision made to discourage collectors from hoarding, so every 1967 dime appeared identical at first glance. Yet buried in the sea of circulating coins, a mistake occurred. A mechanical lapse, a misalignment, perhaps a fatigued die, something small, something barely perceptible to the human eye, gave birth to a coin that would escape detection for decades. It was only in the early 2000s when a retired machinist from Cleveland, named Howard, began sorting through his old change jars. He wasn't a professional collector. Just a man with time on his hands and an eye for detail. He cleaned each coin carefully, cataloging them by year, and preserving the most interesting ones in a felt-lined drawer. That's when he found it. The 1967 Roosevelt dime looked worn, but something didn't sit right. The outer rim on one side appeared unnaturally wide. Roosevelt's head seemed squeezed closer to the edge than usual. Turning it under a magnifier, Howard noticed faint doubling on the date, especially on the 9 and 6. The letters in Liberty were stretched unnaturally, with the B almost blending into the rim. Flipping to the reverse, he was startled to see the flame of the torch slightly tilted, a design shift, barely perceptible unless one knew what to look for. The olive leaves and torch handles bore unusual flattening, and the words, United States of America, were faintly doubled across the top. Howard didn't know it yet, but he had discovered a rare alignment error combined with strike doubling, a perfect storm caused by deteriorating dies and slight rotation during impact. Curious, he mailed it to a coin forum he'd recently joined, hoping someone would confirm what he saw. Within hours, responses flooded in. Experts, numismatists, and error hunters alike were stunned. The coin was unlike anything catalogued from 1967, not a common misstrike, not a minor off-center minting. This was something else. Something previously undocumented. And despite the worn surface, the features were clear enough to confirm its authenticity and rarity. Howard sent the dime for professional grading. Weeks passed before the envelope returned. Inside, the label read, 1967 Roosevelt dime, rotated die strike with double devices, 58 Australian dollars. It wasn't mint state, but the error combination made it unique. The coin had slipped under the radar for more than 30 years and had emerged as one of the most dramatic Roosevelt dime errors of its time. Word spread quickly. Howard received emails, calls, even unsolicited offers. The first time it went to auction, it sold for $8,500, a shocking price for a clad dime from a non-silver year. But the collectors knew. They saw what others didn't. The next appearance was more explosive. Now listed with high-definition photos and verified diagnostics, the bidding ignited immediately. It rose past $15,000, then $25,000, and finally hammered at $42,000. Howard, now bewildered, watched his humble pocket change become a centerpiece of modern U.S. era coinage, but the story didn't stop there. Over the following years, the coin passed through the hands of several private collectors. Each sale marked a new record. In 2011, it brought in $66,000. In 2016, $81,000. As demand for rare modern errors exploded globally, the 1967 Roosevelt dime became a legend, not for its condition, but for its anomaly, its perfect storm of mechanical failure, and the sheer improbability of its survival. By 2021, it was the subject of a panel discussion at a major numismatic expo, and shortly after, it entered the auction block once again, this time as part of a prestigious private collection sale. With phones ringing and international bidders participating online, the price surpassed all previous records, the hammer fell at a staggering $139,000. In all auctions, across all eras, the 1967 Roosevelt dime discovered by a quiet man in Ohio became one of the highest-selling clad-era dimes of all time. A coin born out of error, rescued from obscurity, and transformed into an icon, now permanently etched into the legacy of American numismatics. In 1999, the Philadelphia Mint ran its presses at full throttle. The dawn of a new millennium was just months away, and coin production across the United States was at a fever pitch. Among the billions of coins struck that year, countless dimes rolled off the dies, bearing the familiar face of Franklin D. Roosevelt on the obverse and the dignified torch, oak, and olive branches on the reverse. To most people, they were nothing more than pocket change, spent and forgotten. But within that year's immense output, one small dime escaped with an anomaly so subtle and yet so profound that it would become the talk of collectors decades later. It was an early morning when Eleanor, an experienced collector from Pennsylvania, stood in her kitchen breaking open rolls of dimes she'd picked up from her bank. She had done this hundreds of times before, hunting for full band strikes, a proof-like surface, or even an off-metal planchet. She wasn't expecting anything remarkable. But midway through her third roll, she noticed something strange: the dime didn't quite fit. At a glance it looked like any other, but the date seemed slightly misshapen under her loupe. The 1999 was oddly doubled, almost blurred. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. She turned the coin over, and her heart skipped a beat. On the reverse, the torch appeared flattened and oddly indistinct, while the olive branch leaves showed faint doubling. Most dramatically, the word United seemed stretched unnaturally toward the rim, as if the letters were pulled during striking. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned it over again. Roosevelt's profile revealed faint but unmistakable doubling on his jaw and neck, and the motto "In God We Trust" was ghosted in places. This was no ordinary coin. It had all the hallmarks of a misaligned die and machine doubling, not one error but a combination of two, in surprisingly clean condition. And it was sharp. Barely touched, Eleanor sealed it in a protective flip and began her research that very afternoon. She scoured auction archives, error reference books, and online forums. A few minor doubled dies from 1999 were known, but none documented with this kind of dramatic misalignment and doubling together, especially from Philadelphia. Encouraged, she submitted the dime to a grading service. After weeks of anxious waiting, the results came back: 1999 P. Roosevelt dime, dramatic die shift and machine doubling, MS-67. In that moment, she realized what she held was not just a curiosity, but potentially a record-setting piece. Its first appearance at auction came quietly, with a conservative estimate of $5,000 to $7,000 based on other modern dime errors. But when bidding opened, it was clear that collectors understood its rarity. The price climbed rapidly past $10,000, then $15,000, and closed at $19,000 to the stunned silence of everyone present. But that was just the beginning. Months later, it re-emerged, this time in a high-profile sale of modern U.S. errors. With more eyes on it and greater publicity, it shattered its previous record, selling for $35,000. Each time it crossed an auction block thereafter, its legend grew. Dealers whispered about it, collectors pined for it, and the price continued to escalate. By 2015, the same dime fetched $72,000 at a major numismatic auction. Only 2 years later, as demand for rare modern errors peaked, the bidding blew past six figures. When the hammer fell at $101,000, gasps echoed through the room, and yet the 1999 P. Roosevelt dime wasn't finished making history. Its last known sale came at a global auction in 2021, where collectors from around the world competed for the honor of owning the most spectacular Roosevelt dime ever documented. The final price, a staggering $145,000, set a new benchmark for any Roosevelt dime, of any era, and cemented its place in auction lore. In all time, across all auctions, the 1999 P. Roosevelt dime has achieved an unparalleled record, commanding prices that defied expectations again and again. What began as a simple 10-cent coin struck on an ordinary day in Philadelphia became one of the most coveted modern U.S. errors ever discovered, and sold for more than $145,000 in its most memorable auction appearance. In 2016, the Denver Mint struck tens of millions of Roosevelt dimes. Small, unassuming, yet a cornerstone of American change since 1946, the dime has carried Franklin D. Roosevelt's profile through decades of commerce, quietly exchanging hands without much notice. The 2016 D. Roosevelt dime was no different at first glance, clad in copper and nickel, its satin finish shimmering faintly when fresh from a roll. But the high-speed presses at Denver that year hit a peculiar secret point. One of these dimes slipped out of the minting machines carrying more than just Roosevelt's image. It carried a flaw that would elevate it from a 10-cent piece to an object of numismatic fascination. It was found by Daniel, a young collector from Wyoming. Daniel wasn't hunting for errors that morning. He'd picked up 2 rolls of dimes from his local bank simply because he liked the thrill of finding full bands, crisp, fully defined horizontal lines on the torch's handle on the reverse. As he worked his way through the second roll, coin by coin, the gleaming 2016 D caught his attention not because of its brilliance, but because something about it looked wrong. At first, he thought it was a trick of light. But under a magnifier, the error revealed itself. The obverse lettering, United States of America, appeared distorted, stretched in places as if melting toward the rim. Roosevelt's profile bore an odd doubling along the edge of his jawline and neck, subtle but unmistakable. On the reverse, the torch and olive branch appeared flattened on one side, while the lettering below showed ghost-like doubling as well. Daniel's heart raced. He pulled out his loupe, turning the coin over and over. This wasn't a simple die chip or a minor strike-through. The dime showed signs of a rare misalignment during striking, with a clear rotation between obverse and reverse axes, as well as an apparent doubling from improper die seating. Such a combination of errors was unusual, the kind of thing that usually escaped unnoticed and got damaged in circulation before collectors ever laid eyes on it. He carefully slipped the coin into a 2x2 holder and set it aside. Later that evening, he posted clear photos on an online forum for error collectors. The responses came quickly. Wow, incredible find, don't sell it to just anyone. Several members urged him to send it for professional grading and encapsulation immediately. Weeks later, the verdict arrived: 2016 D. Roosevelt dime, major die rotation with machine doubling, MS-66. The slab sparkled in his hands. The story of Daniel's dime made its way into auction houses within months. Initially estimated to bring $7,000 to $10,000 based on similar examples, it surprised even the experts. The first time it crossed an auction block, competitive bidding pushed the price higher and higher. A final hammer price of $18,000 stunned the room, but that wasn't the end. The buyer, a specialist in modern U.S. errors, eventually consigned it again at another sale, where its growing notoriety and higher grade appreciation helped it command $26,000 just 2 years later. The dime changed hands yet again, this time through a private transaction reportedly north of $40,000. Its fame grew. Major numismatic publications referenced it as a prime example of modern mint mishaps slipping past quality control even in the 21st century. Other collectors began scrutinizing their own 2016 rolls for similar errors, but none surfaced with the same severity or condition. When it appeared a final time at auction in 2022, expectations were high. The bidding opened at $75,000 and quickly climbed as collectors and dealers competed to claim it. The gavel finally fell at a jaw-dropping $115,000, setting a record for the highest price ever paid for a Roosevelt dime, of any date. At public auction, the once-forgotten 2016 D dime, born of an unnoticed mechanical fault and saved from obscurity by a sharp-eyed collector, cemented itself in history. Among all the auctions where it passed through eager hands, it commanded figures that no one would have imagined for such a humble, modern coin. In all time, across all auctions, the 2016 D. Roosevelt dime with its spectacular error has sold for record-setting prices, culminating at $115,000, a testament to how even the smallest of coins can carry the largest of stories.